Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and drop a like on this video. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers on this channel by the end of the year, so your subscription will be much appreciated. Also, drop a like. There's a reason YouTubers ask for it. It makes the video do better, so please do so. Today's video is like 3 or 4 days late because, I don't know, I didn't talk about it at the time. Actually, I was going to talk about it, and then I slept for like 6 hours too long, and then I couldn't make the video, and that was like 2-3 days ago. So it is what it is. That's life for you. Today I'm talking about DeAndre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns and presumably Mikal Bridges as well. This is an interesting situation that I've been looking at before this news actually became news, just because it was a matter of, you know, what are the Suns doing going forward? Of course, they gave that big contract to Chris Paul, which is not as big of a deal as people made it out to be, because the third year of that deal has a lot of provisions in it that can be exempt and like make the salary a lot less than it actually is. But on top of the Chris Paul contract, which obviously brought him back, longer term, going into this next offseason, DeAndre Ayton is going to be a restricted free agent. And if I'm not mistaken, Mikal Bridges is as well. I think they were drafted in the same draft class. I know they're both up for extension. So this is an interesting conflict because, of course, Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Michael Porter Jr., these guys all got maximum rookie extensions and are now on their team for the long haul. Meanwhile, DeAndre Ayton, who is the starting center of a team that just went to the NBA Finals, is currently not on an extension, nor is Mikal Bridges, the starting small forward of a team that went to the NBA Finals. It's interesting because there's a video that MDJ made a long time ago. I say that like it wasn't like 2 years ago, about the value of shorter term contracts, not shorter term, sorry, lower amount of money contracts and how those can contribute to teams really being wildly successful. When you get to a point where a player as good as DeAndre Ayton is making the money to match how good he is, that limits the ability of your roster to actually improve. Whereas DeAndre Ayton last year on his rookie deal, there's more room to make signings like Chris Paul or Jay Crowder and things like that. But once you get locked into a contract like you are with DeAndre Ayton, you're pretty much in that situation, and it makes it harder to improve. And being that the Phoenix Suns obviously did not win a championship, even though they got a lot closer than many people would have expected them to, it does make it a little awkward because, like, if you want to take the next step, you really can't do it through a move. The next step, I've said now with Phoenix already, is for them to just go towards DeAndre Ayton more. Mikal Bridges takes some strides because I think he showed in the playoffs last year that he has some shot creating chops, even though I never think it'll be a huge part of his game. The fact that he fits well within the offense, I think he can get to like an 18 point per game scorer while being one of the best defensive players in the league and an all defensive guy. And then DeAndre Ayton, I think, isn't utilizing the post nearly as much. I think these two guys are the key to being a better team going forward. However, at the same time, it is difficult to say that while also giving DeAndre Ayton $30 million a year and Mikal Bridges like $20 million a year. And that is what these guys are going to get. It might not come from the Phoenix Suns, but they're going to get it from somewhere. So that is where the conflict lies. Per Adrian Wojnarowski, the Phoenix Suns' reluctance to offer a maximum rookie contract extension for former #1 overall pick DeAndre Ayton has stalled discussion on a deal. So DeAndre Ayton rightfully wants a maximum contract. And I should put a caveat in this. By rightfully wants that maximum contract, I mean that he knows that with his age and with as good as he is at his age, he's going to get a max contract. Now, I have said for a long time now that with how salary works in the NBA, it's kind of flawed because like the 30th best player in the NBA and the best player in the NBA are both max contract players. And it's weird. Now, I based on the amount of revenue that NBA players make by comparison to owners, I'm of the opinion that NBA players should make more money than they do. Not necessarily because, you know, it's not like I'm fighting to the death for it, because it's like, look, millionaires, I'm not going to fight to the death for you to make more money. But if we're just looking at it, especially if it's like from the fruits of your labor type of deal, I think players in general make less money than they should for the revenue that they generate. Even though amongst professions within America and just in general, they make a higher percentage of the income than a lot of other professions. But then we're getting into economics, and the politics of that. So I'm just going to avoid that conversation. I'll leave that for my Twitter. The point is, I'm not one to advocate for players to make less, but if we're looking at salary as a scale for how good a player is, how much salary they should make as a result of that, the 30th player and the best player making the same amount of money does not really make sense. But this is the system that we currently exist within. Whether or not you agree, which I do not, with players that are not max level talents, or at least not currently, the part of the salary that comes into play here is potential, but at least not currently. DeAndre Ayton is not a max caliber player whatsoever. Doesn't matter, he's gonna get it. So whether or not you agree with that, that's kind of how it goes. Tobias Harris got that contract that he did. Chris Middleton, less so, seems bad now because everyone thinks higher of Chris Middleton, rightfully so, than they used to, but also got a max contract that seemed a little high, and I wouldn't say he's worth a max, but he's far from the most not worth a max anymore, like some people would have put him before. The point is, whether or not you think players should make this amount of money or this percentage of the salary cap for how good they are, this is how the system currently works. So a team like OKC, for example, after they have their draft, they would offer DeAndre Ayton a max contract. They have the salary to it. They have the youth where it makes sense with their timeline. He's also just good right now. So even if you're not a team that is looking for youth necessarily, would still be willing to give DeAndre that contract because he's as good as he is right now. And I think he's going to take a leap this coming season and might even be worth a max contract by the end of the season, which maybe that's part of what Phoenix is looking at contract-wise here, now that I'm saying that out loud, is like, why don't we make him prove it? Because we still have him as a restricted free agent, so we can bring him back anyways. So if he makes a big stride this year, he further proves that he's worth that money, and then we're more comfortable giving him that. Now that I'm saying that out loud, that makes more sense. But the point is, DeAndre is going to make this money, and then it gets to Mikal Bridges. Mikal is not going to get a max contract. However, will he get like 20? I mean, a forward who I believe 18 point per game type of guy, can be anyways. One of the best defensive wings in the league, versatile. Yeah, I think he gets around 20. That's about how much a really good starter goes for. And Mikal Bridges is already a good starter, leaning towards really good, and I think he'll be there even by the end of next season. So Phoenix is at a crossroads where they kind of have to lock into this roster, and I don't know that they're necessarily comfortable with that from the front office perspective, because they want to make more improvements by making moves. And once you have these guys on the contracts you do, your salary is locked because you have Chris Paul on that contract, and then you have Devin Booker on his contract, obviously. You have $50 million dedicated to DeAndre Ayton and Mikal Bridges. There's not a whole lot of flexibility after that. Like, you're kind of just locked into what you're locked into, and how far that team can go is as far as you're going to go, because that's just the roster that you have. That said, I think Phoenix is overthinking it, and I think that's the crux of this, and I think that's why DeAndre Ayton could potentially be frustrated with them, is like, look, Phoenix has been bad since Steve Nash left, and I believe they were even not great for the last couple of years of Steve Nash being there, just because he wasn't as good and the team around him wasn't as good. But they're a good team. They might not be as high, and they might not get as far as winning a championship, and obviously if you got that close, you should still strive to get there. But if you can lock into being a really good team for the next 5 years or so, maybe even longer, if losing Chris Paul from his age and retirement is not as big of a deal as I think it might be, then you should be happy with that. Like, maybe, a couple of seasons from now, 5 years, as I mentioned earlier, Devin Booker's like, okay, this team's good, but I want to win a championship, and he goes somewhere else. You might have to bite that bullet, but at the end of the day, I would be satisfied if I'm Phoenix after being bad for a decade to be one of the best teams in the conference. And as I mentioned earlier, I think DeAndre Ayton is going to be, at the very least, going to be what is currently a max player in the NBA right now. I don't think DeAndre Ayton's level of production right now is worthy of $35 million per year. It's probably worth like 25, but I think he'll work himself up to that 10 plus more by the end of this season even, especially if the Suns look to give DeAndre Ayton the ball more. I said this before, even in my video about DeAndre Ayton being a disappointment or whatever. I wasn't saying that DeAndre Ayton's really not doing what he should. I think there's just less opportunity for him than he truly deserves, because he came into the league as a post option, and that's barely something they do. Came into the league, had a mid-range game that he could go to, something he's barely able to do. So I would hope that Phoenix, especially with them not extending him, I hope that they're trying to give him more opportunity to prove that he is worth that money, because he's going to get that money. But prove that he's worth it, and they'll feel more comfortable giving him that money. As for Mikal Bridges, honestly, I would lock him into contract right now, because I think it might very well end up being like an OG and Anunoby situation where you get him for the money that he's worth. Let's say you get him for 18 even. I believe the Raptors got OG for like 16. And then a year later, it's like, that guy should have waited a little bit longer because he's worth more than that now. So I would give Mikal that money now. I'm certain that DeAndre Ayton is getting a max contract, whether you want to give it to him or not. I'm not certain that Bridges will get like 25 or something like that. So I would try and get Bridges while the value of him is as low as I think it's going to be, because I think he's going to take a stride as well. And as mentioned, you might not be able to make moves, but those two guys being much improved will be worth the fact that you can't make moves, because I think DeAndre Ayton will be even an all-star caliber player next year. Bridges will be one of the best role players in the league, even bordering on being a star caliber guy. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that Phoenix situation that nobody has thought about since like 4 days ago. But whatever, is what it is. Goodbye.